Two neighbors, same street, same kind of job for 30-something years, and almost the exact same Social Security benefit waiting for them at the end of it. Let's call them Carol and Dennis. Carol turned 62, and the week she was eligible, she claimed, why wouldn't she? She was tired. She'd earned it. And honestly, there was a quiet little voice telling her to grab the money while it was still there, before the government found some way to take it away. So she locked it in, and the check started arriving. And for the first time in her life, she had guaranteed money showing up every single month without working for it. She felt smart. She felt safe. Dennis, next door, did something that looked, for about 8 straight years, completely insane. He waited. He gritted his teeth, and he did not touch his Social Security until he was 70. 8 years of watching Carol collect while he collected nothing. 8 years of her gently suggesting he was being stubborn, maybe a little foolish, leaving all that money on the table. Then they both drifted into their 80s. And somewhere in there, quietly, without any drama, the whole thing flipped. Because Dennis's monthly check wasn't just a little bigger than Carol's. It was nearly double. And by the time you add it all up across the rest of a long life, the gap between the choice Carol made on a tired Tuesday at 62 and the choice Dennis made through 8 hard years of patience can run to something like $180,000. Same worker, same earned benefit, one date on a form, 6 figures. My name is Nick, and today we're going to pull apart the single most valuable financial decision most people will ever make. And the strange fact that most people make it almost entirely by accident. And I have to say one thing right at the top, because it's the objection sitting in half of your heads already. Yes, I know. You're worried Social Security won't even be there, so you might as well grab it while you can. It's a real fear, and I'm not going to wave it away. But here's the honest problem with letting that fear drive the decision. Even in the scenarios where the program gets adjusted down the road, the changes being discussed tend to hit future retirees far more than people already claiming, and grabbing a permanently smaller check today to protect against a maybe tomorrow can cost you a guaranteed fortune to hedge against a possible haircut. So park that fear for a few minutes. Let me show you the actual machine, and then you can decide with the whole picture instead of half of it. Because this decision is worth more than almost any investment you'll ever make, and almost nobody treats it that way. Let's start with the default, because the default is the whole problem. 62 is the earliest age you can claim Social Security, and it is, by a mile, the single most popular age to do it. Enormous numbers of people file the moment the door opens, not because they ran the math, but because it's there, and they're done working, and taking it feels like the obvious move. And that right there is the trap. Not a villain, not a scam, just a default. The most consequential money decision of your entire retirement, quietly made by reflex, on the earliest possible date, by people who never sat down and actually calculated what that reflex costs. You wouldn't buy the first house you walked into without checking the price. But the biggest income decision of your life? Most people take the very first option on the menu and never look at the rest of it. And I want to be clear that this isn't because people are lazy or foolish. The default is powerful for very human reasons. You've been working for 40 years and you're exhausted. The money is sitting right there, offered to you, and every instinct in your body says, take what's on the table. There's a nagging fear the program won't last. And nobody, not the government, not your employer, not usually even your bank, sits you down and walks you through what the other options are actually worth. So the deck is quietly stacked toward claiming early, and most people follow the path of least resistance without ever seeing the fork in the road they just walk past. That's not a character flaw. That's a system that makes the expensive choice the easy one and the profitable choice the hard one. So let's look at the rest of the menu, because this is where it gets genuinely surprising. Here's the mechanism nobody explains clearly. Social Security is designed so that the longer you wait to claim between 62 and 70, the bigger your monthly check becomes, permanently, for the rest of your life. And it's not a small bump. If you claim at 62, you're locking in a permanently reduced check. If you wait until your full retirement age, around 67 for most people today, you get your full benefit. And if you hold out all the way to 70, your check grows even more on top of that. Add it all up, and the person who waits from 62 to 70 ends up with a monthly benefit roughly 76% larger than the person who grabbed it early. Same work history, same lifetime earnings. One check nearly double the other, decided entirely by when you filed. Think about that for a second. There is almost no safe, guaranteed investment on earth that pays you to wait like this. You're being offered a permanent, inflation-adjusted raise for every year you can hold off, backed by the federal government. And most people turn it down without realizing they were ever offered it. Let me put real dollars on it so it stops being abstract. Say your full benefit at 67 would be $2,000 a month. Claim at 62 instead. And that same benefit shrinks to roughly $1,400 a month, permanently, for the rest of your life. Wait until 70, and it grows to around $2,480 a month. So the exact same person with the exact same work history is choosing between a $1,400 check and a nearly $2,500 check. And the only variable is the date on the form. That's over $1,000 a month, every single month, for as long as you live. And it compounds into real money frighteningly fast. $1,000 extra a month across a 20-year retirement is $250,000. And that's before you even count the fact that Social Security rises with inflation. So the bigger check also grows by bigger dollar amounts every year. The gap doesn't just exist, it widens the longer you live. But, and this is the honest but, waiting isn't automatically the right answer because there's a catch. And the catch is the thing everyone secretly worries about. What if you wait and then you don't live long enough to enjoy the bigger check? This is the real question underneath the whole decision, and it has a name: the break-even. Here's how it works. When you claim early, you get smaller checks, but you get way more of them. You've got an 8-year head start on your neighbor. When you claim late, you get bigger checks, but you start years behind. So there's a specific age where the two strategies cross over, where the late claimers' bigger checks finally catch up to and overtake the early claimers' head start. That crossover, the break-even, typically lands somewhere in the early to mid-80s. Before that age, claiming early actually won. After that age, waiting wins and keeps winning, bigger and bigger for every extra year you live. So the entire decision, stripped all the way down, is really a single question. Do you expect to live past your early 80s? If you have a serious health condition, a family history of shorter lifespans, and you genuinely don't expect to see your mid-80s, then claiming early can be the mathematically correct move, and I mean that. But if you're in decent health and the women in your family routinely hit 90, then claiming early is very likely leaving a fortune on the table because you're gonna sail right past that break-even and spend a decade or more on the smaller check you locked in at 62. And here's the part that makes the break-even so counterintuitive, so pay attention to this. It feels like claiming early is the safe choice, the cautious choice, the bird in the hand. But flip it around. What's the actual risk you're protecting against by claiming early? You're protecting against dying young. And if you die young, guess what? You're gone. The money doesn't matter to you anymore. The real financial danger in retirement isn't dying too soon. It's living too long and running out. That's the outcome that actually hurts. The one where you're 91 and the money's gone. And the bigger check from waiting is precisely the thing that protects you against that danger. So claiming early feels safe, but actually leaves you most exposed to the one financial risk that can genuinely ruin your final years. The cautious feeling choice is, for a healthy person, quietly the risky one. And here's where the whole thing gets quietly dangerous. Because of one word people misuse constantly: average. People hear the average lifespan is somewhere in the late 70s or early 80s. And they think, well, that's right around the break even. So it's basically a coin flip. Might as well take it early. But that reasoning has a hole in it big enough to drive a retirement through. Average means half of people live longer than that. And it gets worse because those averages include people who died young, which drags the number down. If you've already made it to 62 in reasonable health, your realistic life expectancy is meaningfully longer than the headline average everyone quotes. So a huge number of people are making an 8-figure lifetime decision by anchoring to a number that doesn't even apply to them, and it's quietly nudging them toward the early claim that costs the most. It's like planning a road trip around the average temperature of the whole country when you're driving through one specific state in one specific season. The average is technically true and completely useless for the decision in front of you. And look, if this is landing, if you're realizing you or someone you love picked a date without ever running any of this, that exact moment of clarity is why I built a school community. It's where I break down how I take this kind of research and turn it into a faceless YouTube channel that actually grows. The digging, the scripting, the whole system, step by step. No gatekeeping, no upsell. If you've ever thought about building something of your own out of this exact kind of curiosity, the links are in the description. Come hang out. Now, everything I've said so far is really about one person deciding for themselves. But there's an entire second layer to this that married couples almost always miss, and it can be the biggest factor of all, the survivor benefit. Here's the piece nobody puts on the brochure. When one spouse in a married couple dies, the survivor doesn't get to keep both Social Security checks. They keep the larger of the two, and the smaller one goes away. So think about what that means. The higher earner's claiming decision isn't just about the higher earner's lifetime. It's about setting the size of the check that the surviving spouse, very often the wife, who statistically outlives the husband, will live on for years, sometimes a decade or more, completely alone after the first spouse is gone. So when a higher earning husband claims early to grab a smaller check faster, he might feel like he's making a smart call for himself. But what he's actually doing, without realizing it, is permanently shrinking the lifeline his widow will depend on during the most financially vulnerable years of her entire life. Waiting to claim in that scenario isn't just buying himself a bigger check. It's buying his spouse security for the years she'll face without him. That's the calculation almost nobody runs. And it's arguably the most important one on the whole table. And the numbers here can be brutal in a way people don't see coming. Picture a couple where the husband claimed early and locked in that reduced check. He passes away first, as husbands statistically tend to. Now his widow, in her 80s, loses the smaller of their two checks and is left living on the reduced benefit he locked in decades earlier for what could be 10 or 15 more years. Compare that to the couple where the husband waited and maximized his check. Same death, same grief, but his widow inherits a benefit nearly double the size, and it carries her through the rest of her life with real breathing room. The decision the husband made on a form in his 60s is still actively shaping his wife's standard of living long after he's gone. That is the definition of a decision worth getting right, and it's the one the just take it early crowd almost never even mentions. So let me be fair and steelman the other side hard, because I refuse to turn this into everyone must wait until 70, which is its own kind of bad advice. Claiming early is genuinely the right move for a lot of people, and here's when. If you have real health problems or a family history that makes a long life unlikely, take it early. You'll likely come out ahead, and you should enjoy the money while you can. If you're out of work at 62 with no other income and no way to pay the bills, a smaller check now beats a bigger check you can't survive long enough to reach. Waiting is a luxury, and if you can't afford it, you claim. If claiming early lets you leave your invested retirement savings untouched so they can keep growing, the math can actually favor it in some cases. And some people simply value having the money in hand now at a healthier, more active age, more than a bigger number in their 80s. And that's a real, legitimate preference, not a mistake. The point was never that early is wrong. The point is that early should be a choice, not a reflex. So let me compress this whole thing into 3 beats in case you drifted off somewhere around the break even. Your monthly check grows dramatically for every year you wait, up to about 76% more. Whether waiting pays off comes down to one question: how long you'll live. And most people badly underestimate that. And for married couples, the higher earner's claiming age quietly sets the check their surviving spouse lives on alone. Waiting grows the check. Longevity decides the winner. The survivor inherits your choice. Now here's how to actually make this decision instead of defaulting into it. First, be honest about your health and your family's longevity, not the national average, your actual situation. If the people in your family tree tend to make 90, that's the number that matters, not the headline. Second, if you're married, Run it as a couple, not two individuals, and pay special attention to what the surviving spouse would be left with, because that check has to last through years of grief and solitude. Third, look at your other income, your savings, your pension, your ability to bridge the gap. Sometimes the smartest move is to spend down a little of your own savings in your 60s specifically, so you can delay Social Security and lock in that bigger, government-backed, inflation-protected check for life. And fourth, if you genuinely need the money now to live, take it. And don't let anyone shame you for it. Survival beats optimization every single time. None of that is a command to wait. All of it is a command to decide on purpose with the real numbers, instead of grabbing the first option because it's the first option. So think about Carol and Dennis one more time. For 8 years, Carol looked like the smart one. And honestly, if either of them had died at 75, she would have been, this isn't a story about her being foolish. It's a story about the fact that she never actually chose. She defaulted. She took the earliest date because it was the earliest date. And she never once sat down and asked how long she might live, or what her husband would be left with, or what that patience might have been worth. Dennis didn't necessarily have some genius insight. He just refused to make the biggest income decision of his life by accident. And that refusal, that single act of actually running the math, is the whole difference. Not luck, not a secret, just the decision to treat a six-figure choice like a six-figure choice. Because that's the real mistake. And it was never about the age on the form. The mistake is letting the most valuable financial decision of your entire life happen to you by default on a tired Tuesday, instead of choosing it with your eyes open. The right age genuinely depends on you, your health, your marriage, your money. But the one thing that's wrong for almost everyone is not deciding at all. So here's the question I'll leave you sitting with. Whether it's you or your parents or someone you love who's coming up on this choice, did anyone ever actually run the numbers, the longevity, the survivor benefit, the break even? Or did they just circle 62 on the calendar because that's what you do? Sit with that one. And if you want to figure it out next to other people doing the same thing, you already know where I'll be. I'll see you in the next one.